So, Guvna B, also known as Isaac, welcome to Hope and Anchor. Welcome to this virtual table. We like to think of ourselves as sort of a virtual pub table, although obviously we are not at a pub together. We are on Zoom. You are someplace, I am someplace, but it's great. It's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Just out of interest, when you're at the pub, what is your drink of choice?
Well, that's a good question. I got sober about 12 years ago. So my drink of choice, though thanks be to God, I don't feel a temptation to drink anymore. So that's the gift of healing. So I can go to the pub with friends, no problem. So my drink of choice these days is like Diet Coke or a
Yeah.
coffee. What about you? What are you drinking?
Um, well, my dad, he really loved Guinness, but I hated it. And then about 3 months ago, I randomly had some Guinness because that was all some I had on tap. And I thought, oh, it's an acquired taste, but yeah, I don't mind it. So yeah, I'm a bit like you. I'm more of a soft drink guy, but every now and again, it's a pint of Guinness.
Yeah. That's cool. I used to love Guinness. I've had my fill of Guinness, but I'll hand it over to you now for that. That's great. um, well, we're so glad to have you with us. We like to ask all of our guests at the beginning, where do you live in the world and what's your local? Your local could be your local pub, your local coffee shop, your local dog park, your local parents and toddlers group, wherever it is that you go and hang out with friends and make new friends. Where are you in the world today and what's your local?
So I'm in Southeast London in a place called Greenwich, and my local is. It sounds so uncool because I'm normally there with kind of middle-aged mums, and I'm like the only young guy in there. But it's Gale's Bakery because they're the only place in my local area that I can trust to do a half decent coffee. So yeah, Gale's.
All right, shout out for Gales. Is that actually in Greenwich or is that someplace around Greenwich?
It's around Greenwich, so it's actually in Blackheath.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm there at sporadic times. So uh, I wouldn't have shared that information if it was the same time every week because people could find me. But Girls in Blackheath, I'd definitely recommend it.
All right, that's great. Shout out for Gales. You are. It's great to have you on the show. You're an author. You're a rapper. You're a poet. You are a broadcaster. You're a multiple music award winner. I think at one point in your life, you were also a shoe salesperson. You've had a lot of accomplishments in your life, in your relatively young life. And we could go online and read about all that stuff. And it's a testimony to the gifts you've got and things that God's given you. Wonderful. I'm always curious about the why beneath the what. So the why beneath the accomplishment. So I'm just curious, in your life and your life work right now, what is the burning fire in your belly? What's the thing that keeps you up, conspiring at night for a better world? What's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, man. I think when you reel off all the different things I do, underneath it, the reason why I do them and the fire has always remained the same. And I guess it came from my parents being Ghanaian, coming over to England, having me growing up on a council estate, working class culture, predominantly very diverse area, so a lot of first generation Brits. But then me going to school in Essex, which is a predominantly white kind of borough, and then me becoming a Christian and being in all these different worlds, the grime world, the rap world, the Christian world, the gospel world, and realizing that I don't feel at home in any of them, but equally I feel quite comfortable in all of them. And God has used me to just bridge the gap between all the different worlds that I'm involved in. And I realized that when I was hanging out with my middle class white friends at school, they couldn't always connect with my working class black friends, but I felt comfortable in both worlds. And so I think my burning desire is to bridge the gap between different worlds, help people grow in empathy for people who aren't like them, and to do that via communicating stories and communicating issues that can galvanize people. So
Hmm.
whether that's me talking about youth violence through rap music or talking about masculinity on a broadcast show or whatever, I just wanted to use the art of communication to bring people from different worlds together, because I don't think that we should be divided. I don't think we should just stay in our own corners with people that are exactly like us. I think we should celebrate differences, and we've got a lot to learn from each other.
So you're between all those different worlds, and like there are multiple worlds, right? Like it just gets more and more diverse. There's like all these little chambers in this huge world that's God's world, and you're moving between lots of those chambers or rooms and sort of communicating, translating, I think is how I was thinking of it as I was reading your book. I found it interesting. You wrote in your book, you've written a couple of books, but I'm talking about this book, which is a fabulous book, and we'll dive into that in a second. You wrote in your book, all my life, I've struggled to communicate. I never mastered the art of communication. And then you were just talking about like your calling, your burning fire is to be a communicator. Did you just figure out how to do it? Or do you still struggle with understanding yourself as a communicator who is called to communicate? Like what happened?
Yeah, I definitely still struggle. I think ultimately, where I fall short is I'm a very slow processor. So broadcasting and music is fine because I have time to collate my thoughts, think about what I want to speak about, think about all my points and that kind of stuff. But in conversation with those that are closest to me, when things happen in my life that require an immediate response, I am absolutely horrific at processing what I'm feeling. And I'm the kind of person that even my wife will tell you, if something happens, I won't give a response, but 3 days later, I'll come back and say, okay, now I know what I think about that. And yeah, I think I just really struggle with processing. My processing speed is absolutely abysmal.
uh, you know what? There's like a slowness is not necessarily a bad thing. You write a lot about it in your book, particularly with your wife and that whole kind of slow dance of communication with her. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But so slow processing is a challenge, but maybe a gift. I don't know. What would be, I think there are a lot of people who feel like maybe they have a message that God has given them to communicate, or maybe they have a deep calling that they're trying to voice, but they feel really unequipped to speak it out. They feel unable to communicate it for whatever reason. I'm just curious, for people who are listening and watching, what might you say to those folks who are struggling in that maybe in the same way or different way from you to communicate? What would be an encouragement you'd have for them?
And I think we're all different and we're all unique, but one thing I found is that the message is more important than the method. And so I think, when I was growing up, it was always, especially for my parents, oh, you have to be, a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. And now I'm in a position where I'm doing so many various things. Some would argue I'm not an expert in any of them, but I think the message that we're carrying and what God has given you is more important than how that plays out or how you get it out. So don't overthink, right, I'm carrying this. How do I make it work? Where do I have to go? What job do I have to do? And all that kind of stuff. Just think it's inside me. It's who I am, whether I'm on the bus, the train, in an office, on a site. It doesn't really matter where, but what God's given me is inside of me. And whatever way I can get that out is fine. So yeah, I would just say don't overthink the method. I think life is a lot more fluid than we like to think. It's not as rigid. So I don't think your calling is just a job or a singular method. I think it's who you are, and it can come out in various ways.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think in old school days, people used to think about vocation as the thing you did, like your job full time. And that might be being a bin collector or a bus driver or a doctor or a minister or a rapper. But you're talking about essentially you're the same person. We are the same people, or should be, wherever we are. And our
Yeah.
vocation is to be that person in all these different places. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, exactly. You're a much better processor than I am. That was very well understood.
I don't know about that. I don't, I think there's a public record of your processing in your music and your books. I've not written a book or made any CDs, so I think you're well ahead of me. I know you're yeah. Don't worry about that. I was going to ask about your book, which your second book, which is called Unspoken: Toxic Masculinity and How I Face the Man Within the Man. And I just want to recommend it. We'll plug it on the show as well. But for those of you who are watching the long form video, just an amazing book. It is like a memoir about your family, your influences growing up. It's a reflection, wondering where God is in the pain and in the gray, and the grief surrounding your dad's death. I sort of experienced it in general as like a testimony of your own growth and change and transformation from feeling isolated, locked down, dealing with depression. And not that all those things have gone away, but towards kind of more vulnerability and honesty and liberation. I mean, it's an extremely honest and vulnerable, funny, uh, sad book, all those things. And I know people will identify it with parts of your story. How does it feel having all of that out there?
Yeah, it's actually surprisingly freeing and liberating because for so much of my life, I hid my weaknesses because I thought that if they were just out there, then I don't know, it's just a really vulnerable feeling. But I've actually found that when I just throw my weaknesses out there and share them with the people in my life or the people that are interested in what I have to say, I actually feel liberated to want to really face them. And it's almost like nothing can hold me down. There are no secrets that can, just really get me down and stuff. So it's liberating. And I think a big part of me writing the book was, growing up in church, testimonies always used to be like, I used to struggle with this,
Mm.
then God healed me and saved me, and now I'm fine. And I love that. That's amazing. But there wasn't enough of, well, I'm still struggling. I'm still on this journey and I'm still trusting God in this. And I wanted to write the book because I'm not where I need to be, but I'm not where I once was. And I think that middle ground and that middle part is where quite a few people sit. And it's quite encouraging sometimes to hear that someone hasn't got it all worked out, but they're still trusting God for it.
Those are the testimonies that I remember the most of all the ones I've heard in my life. I mean, I've heard beautiful, like everything was fixed kind of stories. And I believe those things and trust those. But the ones that I remember, the ones that have helped me are the ones, as you're saying, where people were able to sort of say, I'm on the road, but it's still messy.
Yeah.
Um, does it, I'm just curious, for those people who are like, I'm a control freak. I really, when I read that part in the book and you were like, you like to have everything all figured out, worked out before you put it out there in your art. I was like, oh, I really, really identify with that. For those of us who are control freaks about our message, or maybe are just really scared of like being messy, I guess, which is what a control freak is. Like, what do you say? I mean, you said trust the message earlier, trust the message, not the method. But is there any encouragement or advice you'd give for like taking a step into the gray or into the unworked out?
Yeah. I actually think, wanting to be in control or being a bit of a perfectionist or wanting to ensure that your work is great. It's a great quality, that you care. But I think that even our great qualities, if we're not careful, can become quite detrimental to us. And I think if you look back, and you're like, well, I've been waiting to get this perfect, but it's been, a few months, a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You're actually holding yourself back from more stuff that you can do in the future. And so I think sometimes you just got to follow the piece, and not be overly critical. And you think, if I've got something to say and this can help someone, then I've just got to go for it. And I think it can actually kind of travel into pride when we're too much of a control freak, or we want to be too perfect, because we need to remember that it's not actually about us. A lot of the time we're doing what we do to help other people, and the fact of the matter is, whoever you're trying to help will probably hear 80%, 90% perfect thing rather than a completely perfect. So
Mm.
yeah, just think about the person you're doing it for rather than our own insecurities and perfectionism. And it's a hard thing to do. It's a journey. It's not a destination, but you just got to wake up every day and think, I tried my best. I'm going to chuck it out there and see what else God has in store.
That's great advice. As I was reading your book, I was thinking about the how throughout your life, some of the most touching stories as I read it were a few key people. You described a few key people in your life who chose to step in and to engage you in a way that you did not expect. You expected a certain kind of attitude or approach from them, but they surprised you. So your teacher, Miss Annenson, I don't know if that's how you pronounce her name, who praised you for your gifts with language when you thought she was going to rebuke you. or
Mm.
your youth leader, is it Hafiz or Hafiz,
Yeah.
who said to you, your music isn't really your full self. You're not bringing your full self to this music. I don't see you in it. And then your wife, of course, who's helped you, stepped in to help you process your grief in a really uh, gentle and non-coercive way. All these folks stepped in and offered help, and in some way, even though it was a challenge for you, you let them help you. You said you let them help you. I think some of us have a hard time saying I need help or letting other people help us. Why do you think that's so hard to admit we need help?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for me, because even when you talk about, Hafiz and my primary school teacher specifically, I didn't realize the impacts that they had on me till I looked back. But at the time, I think I was just the kind of person that loved being the king of my own castle, even if that was harmful to me. I didn't want to come across as weak. I didn't want to come across as vulnerable. I didn't want people to think that I was struggling. And it's a weird thing, really, because there were people in my life that loved me and cared for me. I would not love nothing more than to help me through my tough times. But yeah, I had a lot of pride and I wanted to be king of my own castle. And I talk about this a little bit in the book, that we all love that idea until we find ourselves in situations that we can't control. And one of my favorite quotes that I've ever heard, can't remember who said it to me now, is we have to look after the puddles before they turn into floods. And if I spoke to the people in my life that cared for me earlier on, I wouldn't have got myself into so much deep trouble, and I wouldn't have dealt with my trauma in such a bad way. And there wouldn't be this big flood that now I have to go to counseling and therapy and just really work out some stuff. So I'd say I struggled. I don't know about anyone else, but I struggled because I had a lot of pride and I didn't want to be vulnerable. But I think I've come to realize that when you've got people in your life that care about you, there's nothing better than sharing what you're going through with them. It's actually the bravest thing you can do. It's strange that I looked at it as weak. Like, it's actually really brave. And so yeah, I'd encourage anyone to do that.
I love that. One of my friends says that admitting your need or admitting your vulnerability is it's like a superpower. It's like it flips it. So your superpower is admitting that you need help. And I love that. Like that's a superhero that I think is really
Yeah.
biblical. I think Jesus in some sense like really depended on others in order. So, but uh,
I was going to say as well, I think sometimes our prayers are answered in ways that we don't always recognize. So, for example, I don't know what my prayers were at the time, but if I was praying, God, I really want to be more confident, or I really want you to give me peace, in my mind, that answered prayer looks like me waking up one day and being completely peaceful. But it might be God saying, oh, actually, I've put this person in your life because if you have a conversation with him, the relationship that you have with him or her is going to result in more peace for you because this person cares about you, etc. And so I think sometimes we have to open our eyes and realize that our prayers might be answered in slightly different ways.
is it often people for you that are you receive as God's answers to your prayer? Is that a common place where God speaks to you, other people?
Yeah, I think so. Looking back at my life, it's been people and it's been reading the Bible. I think has been massive for me. I'm like not a great Christian when it comes to how often I read the Bible. It's very sporadic. Some people are like, I wake up every morning at 7 a.m. and then read for like 45 minutes and then have a coffee, then I can start my day. For me, it's just random times, but I find that often the pages do jump at the words in the pages jump out at me and really help. But yeah, I've been very blessed to have great people.
Mm. I was going to ask about your spiritual practice or your devotional practice or whatever people call it different things. Your life with God, and um, it's interesting. Like I asked that question. A lot of people on the show are like do sort of what you said, like, oh, I'm not a good Christian, I don't do enough. But then they describe their lives, and it feels like that they are actually bringing an attentiveness to the presence of God in their ordinary life. So one woman I was talking to, actually an MP, she was talking about her early morning swims at the pool is where she feels really, really connected to God. So outside of reading the Bible, which is of course a great thing to do, and outside of people, you're obviously you're a musician. Does music, which is something you make and something you offer, does it also feel like a spiritual practice for you, or is it too caught up in your own art for it to feel? I don't know. Different artists respond differently. Is it spiritual practice for you to make music?
Yeah, definitely. So the whole reason I always loved music, I never really wanted to do it professionally, but the reason why I decided to start taking it seriously is because a guy that I know on my council estate was murdered, and I recognized that a lot of messages in rap music and hip hop music glorified violence, and the person that was murdered, to my knowledge, wasn't a Christian, didn't have a faith of any sort, and I thought, what is in my hands, and what can I do to help young people wake up and realize that they're not just here to make up the numbers, or be a name on a register, or just fill up a seat, but they have a purpose and they have a reason to live and something to live for. And music just started out as me wanting to make a difference. And obviously, I found my purpose in my faith. So it just felt like a great thing to promote. So it started off at the genesis as a spiritual experience. So it's kind of always been that. And that's one of the ways in which I connect to God, even after I've been doing it for 10 years. I actually struggle to write without feeling like God has me writing for a reason. So before, when I was younger, maybe it's to do with I'm just getting old and my brain doesn't work as well as it used to, but I used to be able to write about anything and everything, but now I can only write about things that break my heart and stir my heart and inspire me. And for me, that feels like it comes directly from God. So yeah.
Mm. Could you just give us I don't want to spend too much time on this because, and I don't want to trespass, it may be really personal, but can you just tell us a little bit about that writing process, that creative process? Do you have a set pattern that it always happens this way, like late at night or in the morning, or is it just all over the place?
I think I've only just recently found that environment really helps in terms of like solid ideas, but it always starts with a thought or a new story or something that just randomly like comes to my heart. So with the last album, it was that, so many people in this world, a lot of people feel like they've done okay, but they're not where they need to be. In many ways, they feel like they're everywhere and super successful or whatever. And in other ways, they feel like they're not doing anything and they haven't got, family and friends that understand what they're going through and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of thought stirred the idea for the new album. And then it was a case of taking myself away to just rented a like Airbnb on some farmhouse, like solitude, just to like be with nature and be silent and hear. And that's when I started kind of writing down ideas, fleshing out lyrics and that kind of stuff, and then kind of head to the studio to work with my music producer. But it always starts with a thought that can help people, I think.
Yeah. It does feel like, throughout the book, you kind of discover that a way that you help people is your music. So you've been helped by all these folks that you didn't expect to be helped by, and now you're kind of not in response only, but like your vocation is to help others through your music. And throughout the book, you kind of you include some little texts and social media posts from people who've been affected by your writing or your music. Would there be one either that you in the book that you love, or something that's happened recently where someone's been helped by something you've offered? I don't mean to sort of inflate your pride or ego, but I do think it's important just to claim, like, yeah, God uses us and God's using
Yeah,
you. Is there a story or a fragment you might
yeah.
share?
One comes to mind, but the main reason it comes to mind is because it arrived at a time after I won my second mobile award. And I think at the time I lost my way a bit in terms of what I viewed as success. So I was like, oh, I got this award, these awards, this means I'm doing amazing or whatever. And then someone emailed saying, I listened to your song, Nothing But the Blood, and it stopped me from committing suicide. And
Mm,
then thought, wow, man, like that's what it's about. Like that's the success that means more than any worldly award or any worldly view of success that apparently should validate me. It's about people, life, purpose, and faith. That's what it will always be about. That's what the most important thing is. And Yeah, I think that one just always kind of springs to mind.
It's a powerful, powerful song, piece. I mean, I've got it. I've got it in my book. I made all these notes at the back of things that touch me. I've got this right here is the Nothing But the Blood, page 92. The lyrics, but also I don't think you share that story in the book, but about how it's changing people. So get the book or listen to it online. Amazing song. I just wanted to go back to the title of the book, Unspoken. We've talked about your speaking, your communicating, but toxic masculinity and facing the man within the man. People use that term, toxic masculinity, in different ways. Could you just give us a description quickly of what you mean when you use that term, toxic masculinity?
Yeah, sure. A few people don't like it because I think they feel like I'm saying that, masculinity is toxic. All men are toxic, and that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that we have to try our best to learn as men to listen to our minds and our bodies. There are messages that we've heard from a young age, such as, man up and stiff upper lip and all that kind of stuff. And, being strong is a great thing. But if your mind and your body is telling you actually you don't feel strong and you need to share what you're going through with people around you and you're about to burn out, and we don't listen to our minds and our bodies because we're trying to live up to this view of manliness and masculinity, it's actually really harmful for us, and it can become toxic. Or, to give another example, like strength is an amazing thing, but if it results in a man feeling like he needs to exert his strength over a woman, then that's very toxic. So it's just figuring out that, there are characteristics that, if in the right context, are positive, but we have to be really careful that they don't turn into toxicity. And it was just, I guess, challenging that. And I guess a big part of, the underlying thing is that men, most part, my friends anyway, I can speak for, we just feel like we can't be vulnerable. And the world around us has made us feel that way. And I just want to knock that notion on its head and tell men actually it's fine to communicate, it's fine to say a struggle, and it's fine to be vulnerable.
I was going to ask you what the opposite of toxic masculinity is. What's non-toxic, or what's healthy, a healthy way of being a man? And I think you just were getting at that, like being vulnerable, not having to be, sure of yourself all the time, admitting that you don't know. Anything else that you'd want to add to like a definition of non-toxic, healthy masculinity, or being a man in a healthy way?
Yeah, I'd just say allowing yourself to feel all the things, to feel everything. So if you wake up one day and you're feeling like, I don't know, Johnny Bravo and you're on top of the world, then feel that, man. That's great. Go for it. But if you wake up on another day and you just don't want to face the day and you're down, don't push that feeling to the side. Face it and do the things that you need to do to like embrace that in a healthy way. Speak to the people around you or do something that's great for your mental health. So I just say feel everything. I'm not saying wake up every day and be an emotional wreck. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying just don't be ashamed to feel all the feelings.
Feel the feelings. Yeah. In the book, it's a touching and candid kind of reflection on your family life growing up, and you have just obvious deep love for your parents, your dad who's died, and you talk about how they raised you with like deep understanding, but also you're honest about how they don't always get it right, and even when they try the best. And I think probably all parents, most parents, are doing the best they can with what they have, and they don't get it right. That's being a parent. I was wondering about you. You write in the book about you and Emma are married, and you have a son, and I'm just wondering how all of this stuff, it's not just like it's now you're raising a young boy in the world. And I'm just curious if how that shifted your understanding of what it means to be a man.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm way more empathetic towards my dad because I realized that parenting is not as easy as the kids make you think it is. Yeah, I think I was quite intentional when we had Ezra, and I knew all the things that my dad did really well. For example, work hard to provide for the family, and was always on help to was always on hand to help out when needed. But I was also aware of the things that he didn't do so well, like communicate and share about his feelings and tell us about his day and, take us out for like fun stuff that would kind of build in our bond. And so when Ezra was born, I was quite intentional about saying things to him, even though he can't really understand me yet. Like, I love you, son, just simple things like that. I didn't doubt my dad loved me, but he didn't vocalize it. And so um, I think one of the things that I've learned is that you have to be an intentional parent. You can't just kind of drift through life and hope for the best. We have different challenges. I have different challenges to my dad. He's an immigrant, so he came over to England, and he was probably thinking about how to cover the rent that month, and he had no time to think about his mental health and that kind of stuff. But I just really try and be intentional about prioritizing that and parenting Ezra in a way that I think about, rather than just waking up and hoping for the best.
Mm. Just thinking about young people. I mean, obviously, your music touches people of many generations, but it seems to me like it's young people, youth, young people, children, young adults. That's a huge part of, I don't know, your base, your the people that you're gonna are really resonating with what you're saying. And I'm just thinking about children, young people in the world are often told, I think it's better now, but often told that their voices is not important. They're not important. I think particularly young people of color, face this oppressive system of sort of pushing voices down, not letting their voices being heard, or hearing their voices but not making the change they're calling for. And I know that's not just people of color, but just so, what do you say for young people whose voices are maybe not being listened to, and maybe they're angry or hopeless? What do you say to them as they kind of seek justice and a better world and a better life for themselves?
Yeah, man. I mean, that there's so many levels and layers to that. But I guess the first thing I'd say is your voice does matter. You can make a difference. And if you're passionate about the issue, whether social or whatever, it can make the world a better place. And I think one of the ways that young people can try and, figure that out is racism, for example. If I think about that on a mass scale, it's very overwhelming, because how can me as one individual ever make much of a difference with my voice? It's just a drop in the ocean. It's such a big issue. I find what's helpful is if I break that down and think, well, can I make a difference in my home? Can I make a difference in my friendship group? Can I make a difference at Gail's Bakery, on my road, at my church, when I play football with the lads? And I think for young people, my advice is, when you break it down from macro right down to your level, it makes you feel like you're playing your part a lot more, and you feel like you can make a real difference. And if every single young person, or as many of us as possible, thought that way, you'd be surprised at how much it influences the macro.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because I think sometimes it's either with all kind of oppressive forces, it's either I can't do anything because the force is so evil and so oppressive that it's just I can't do anything, or all I need to do is worry about my own right opinion about this thing and my own right belief about this thing, which is important to have a value. But you're saying, it sounds like, take it to the level, but what all those examples you gave were ones that involved other people. They're all like communal. They're all about getting people together and affecting more than yourself, which I think is really powerful. It's not just about you being amazingly righteous. It's about organizing for change.
No, 100%, man. I think we're called to be outward looking. No one's meant to go through life alone. I think it's actually, if I can say it in a way that's not harsh. I know I can be quite selfish when I think about something, though. This is what I believe, and that's all that needs. No, this is what I believe, but let me do life with people. Let me do community with people, and let's talk together, so that I'm not the only one that's growing, but the people around me are growing as well. And we can learn so much from each other, man. And so, yeah, I really think that can help. But I say all that stuff not to downplay how serious and how big the structures and the systems are that mean that, these massive social issues continue to take place. But I just believe that up until the point we can get all the cocks to turn at the same time, whether it's government legislation, all that kind of stuff. We can still make a difference in our own societies and communities.
People who are watching Hope and Anchor and participate in Hope and Anchor are people of all faiths, really, and no faith. People who are spiritual but not religious, and agnostic and atheist. We're all at the table and having a conversation. And we are a show hosted by folks committed to the way of Jesus and Christian ministry. So I'm just curious, for those of you, for churches and Christian faith groups who want to do a better job of engaging young people fully in ministry and mission and creating spaces that are inclusive for young people, what would be your top tip for like Christian leaders who want to do this well?
Top tip. First of all, I'd say well done for all the work that you do, and keep going. Could be doing things worse, but also there's an opportunity to do things better always. So I'd say people don't care what you know until they know that you care. So lead with empathy and understanding first. When you build trust, earn trust, then it's always easier to have a conversation and move forward. And I guess the second thing I'd say is this generation are very different. They can see through, say ball something, but they can see through it all. So if you don't know the answer to something, or you're winging it, or you're trying to work it out, just say, we can work it out together, lead with honesty and authenticity and vulnerability. No one is looking at anyone to have all the answers. We know that this world is a crazy place at the moment, but it's just nice to work it out together. So you don't have to know it all, and don't be ashamed or embarrassed that you don't.
So don't fake it. Don't pretend.
Basically.
Like that, the bull blank meter is very, very, very sensitive and very high. People sense that immediately. So just don't try to fake it. I love that. We're almost out of time, but I have one more question for you, if it's all right, and then a little sign off. The question is, and you've been really vulnerable in your book, so I'm going to ask you do something you've already done in your book. But at Hope and Anchor, we're always trying to encourage folks to try new things, to get out there, take a step, take a risk, and sometimes when you make a plan and take a risk, it goes beautifully and amazing things happen. And sometimes you take a risk and it just really does not go well. It goes wrong, it falls apart. And I wonder if you'd be willing to share a time. It could be a deep time, it could be a light-hearted kind of time where you took a risk and it did not go to plan. What went wrong and what did you learn?
Well, the very first thing that comes to mind is I wanted to run 5K. I'm very lazy, don't run at all. So I bought like some new running gear, trainers, all that kind of stuff. And I think on the first run I did about 2K. And I said I was going to keep going until I get to 5. And I gave up after about 4 days. And so I don't really know why that came to mind, but I felt like a huge failure. But then the other day I was thinking, at least you've done 2K, which is 2K more than you would normally do. So I guess that's the time I've kind of stepped out. But in terms of risk, I fail quite often, so it shouldn't be too hard to think about. But yeah, there've been like a few book ideas before Unspoken, which I started and was really passionate about, but just kind of, just dwindled out and failed and stuff. But I always say that the main thing I've learned in all my failures is that even if it's not the thing that you were meant to be doing or the thing that you saw to fruition, it's going to lead you to the thing that eventually comes out, and you'll learn things along the way. So I try not to look at them as failures too much, and just laugh at them now. But if it's not the thing, it will lead to the thing.
That's right. So do you want to be a runner, or do you not want to be a runner? Have you discerned like running's not for me? Or are you still open to the possibility of that?
No, I definitely want to do it because I think it's just absolutely appalling that I've never completed a 5K before, and my friends do it with ease. But yeah, it's definitely on my list.
You got to do it, man. I'm a runner, a lay. I'm not fast. I'm not good. I want to encourage you. Here are my top tips for you, Isaac. Check out Couch to 5K app. really, really good. It breaks it down for you. And then go find a park run in your community. I don't know if you park run. It's like it's a free time 5K in local parks. And I have to say, like, as an American, one of the things when I moved to Britain that I was like just aware of is like Americans and Brits like offer affirmation in really, really different ways. So you know, but so I was like, I'd been living in the UK for a couple months, and I went to a park run, and you know, at a park run, like people stand around the park and clap for you as you run. Like, and so you have like, you know, fast, like teenagers and like old grandmas who are running like a 20-minute mile pace, but they're all getting clapped for and like, yeah, you can do it. And I was like, what is this space? What is happening here? Oh, wait, it's called affirmation. So if you need some encouragement, just find a local park run.
Cool. I'll do it. I'm downloading the Couch to 5K app, and then I'll find the park run. You hit it at something. I wanted to know the main difference between American affirmation and English affirmation.
Well, yeah, I think Americans are just in general like over the top, you know, and like, and I'm not saying that's a good thing necessarily. It's just like it's a cultural form. So like super like, oh yeah, you're amazing. You can, you know, like that kind of stuff. Whereas Brits in general, and this varies from generation to generation and class differences and, you know, all the different things. But Brits, I think, are just a little more like if you get like mad praise, it's like, well done. Well done. That's like
a bit more reserved.
A little more reserved.
Yeah.
So, anyways, all right. Here's the sign off. You're at a concert. You've done all your sets. You come back on for the encore, and you just have a sense after the encore. I don't know if you do encores. I've never been to one of your concerts. I should go to one of your concerts. You'd have the sense backstage. You're like, I got one more thing to say, and so you go back out. It's the concert arena is full. People of Christian faith, people of other faiths, people of no faith, and you just want to give them a blessing. You want to give them a benediction or a charge to go into the world. What do you say to all those beautiful people?
I'd say every single day you wake up, know that you're here for a reason. Nothing's an accident. So make the most of it, and you're never, ever as alone as you think you are. So look around.
I love it. Governor B, also known as Isaac, thank you so much for hanging out and being part of the Hope and Anchor conversation. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.